What do you feel like in today's market are some of the really important things for them to be thinking about? Because I don't know about your market, it's kind of changing. Like we're right in that transition period here in Arizona. What is important for people to be thinking about today when they're going out looking at buying?
To me, that they are in a position better for people buying right now are in a better position than they were a year ago. And like, I do think that that's important for people to know because I think a lot of people put off buying because last year, the years prior to this were like just hard for first time buyers. It was hard for people to get deals unless you had a ton of assets or you were selling a house to buy another house. Like it was really hard in this market. So I think it's
Yeah.
important for people to know that there now is a space that exists where it's not as difficult, where you can negotiate, where you don't have to blindly just buy a house, ask, give more money than what they're asking, not ask for any repairs. Like all of that has changed. And I feel like it has really gone back to being normal. Like what we're experiencing right now in the market is normal.
Welcome to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, and you want to learn some of the insider secrets and uncensored truths from the true professionals in and around real estate, you've come to the right place. Now, let's buckle up for the uncensored truth about real estate and join your host, Brian Cardenas.
All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. If you guys are catching us on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you get notified when the next episode drops. And if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, we would love it if you would give us a 5-star rating. And please share this episode out to your friends and family that you think might benefit from all the great information that we have to share here. And I wanted to, first of all, welcome our very special guest, Kristen Morgan from There's No Place Like Home team out in Georgia. Kristen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm like excited to see what we're going to do, what we're going to talk about today.
I know you're a little scared too, right? You don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, no, I'm always scared. No, I'm just kidding. I'm always up for a challenge. Let's say that.
There you go. Well, so if you could just kind of give us a little bit of your background, kind of where did you start out? Where did you come from? And how did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've only been doing mortgages for about 6 years, but prior to that, I worked at a credit union, the largest credit union here in Georgia, for 9 years. So I was a branch manager. I worked in the loan department. I did like an array of things while I was there, but I really am thankful for that 9 years I spent there because it really taught me a lot about people, about finances, about like all kinds of stuff. But just like seriously, one day I was at work and went to lunch and was thinking to myself, like, I wonder what it would take for me to do mortgages. And I legit just called somebody up that I knew was in the business. They're like, oh, yeah, you got to do this 20 hours. It's the worst damn 20 hours of my life. Like literally, if I could, I mean, I can't think of another time in my life where I was just like, what am I doing? But it was pretty difficult because I was working full time. I had a baby at the time. My baby was literally not even probably 1 year old. And so just started getting into it. And then I don't know, it just escalated really quickly. Got my license. Within 30 days, I closed my first loan. Within the first 6 months, I closed 18 loans. And then it was just kind of like, oh, wait, no, I can do this. Like, oh, and I can be really good at this. And so it just has been escalating. And then just over the last few years, I've just, I've had some really great mentors and people that have worked with me. And now it's like come real full circle where I've got everything in place and just continuing to grow. And I just love it very, very much.
So what was that first thing? Like, obviously you were in banking and you had, dealing with finances and stuff like that. What piqued your interest about mortgages?
So oddly enough, prior to me working at the credit union, I did work at Wells Fargo Financial, which we want to get into that, but I did work in there. So I had
open up for people without them knowing.
No, not the bank. No. It was literally like Wells Fargo Financial where they did like subprime lending. Okay. And like that was before all the craziness. So I worked there. So I had a little bit of experience with doing mortgages. I'd had a taste of it just in that environment, but usually we were doing credit cards and car loans. But then I don't know, like we talked about this recently. I started thinking, I was like, you know what? I had applied for a mortgage position at the credit union, literally maybe like probably 3, 4 or 5 times. And every time they'd be like, oh, you don't have any experience. We won't hire anybody without any experience. And I don't know, I really genuinely cannot pinpoint it to one exact moment of like, oh, I want to do mortgages. It was just a true random thought. And I was like, and it worked out. It's worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah. So when they told you that they wouldn't take you, did that motivate you a little bit more?
Yes, of course. Yeah, if anybody knows anything about me, I'm that kind of show me, like, you can't tell me, you got to show me kind of girl. And like, if you say I can't do something, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, hold my beer, watch this, you know? But yeah. And it's weird because like, I think that everybody endures different seasons of life, right? Probably at that season, if I had gone into doing mortgages, I may not have been as successful at it as I was coming out in the season when I was like truly ready for it. And so I just kind of feel like, you know what, that no, I knew that that no was only a no from them. Didn't mean I couldn't do it. But then when an opportunity came where I could do it on my own, I just did it. And in a much better environment than working for like a credit union for sure.
Yeah. And then you've gone through a few different iterations, or a couple of different iterations in terms of like your career, like
Mhm.
where you worked and where you are now. Can you kind of just talk about that a little bit? And,
Yeah.
why are we working together?
Yeah, so I am once I got started and I had no idea. I was really naive about this. When I got started and I was closing all these loans, like I had no idea that that was like very rare. And my husband's a firefighter. He has a firefighter that worked with him that's an incredible loan officer. And he was kept seeing all this stuff on social media. And so he like calls me up and he's like, "Are you doing mortgages?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What the hell? Like, get your ass over here and do mortgages with me then, if that's the case." And so he ended up being an incredible mentor to me for like 2 years. We shared resources. And then at one point, they decided that they were like our branch that I was a part of decided that they were going to go to another company. And I opted to just stay behind, stay where I was because I built up a lot of traction. I had my team built up at the time. I went from doing everything on my own to sharing resources with Dave. I don't mind sharing who he is because he's incredible. You should interview him. He's so awesome. To doing sharing resources with him, LOA, going through that. And then at some point, we just basically reached a time where it's like, your LOA, we can't share loan partners anymore. Like, I need my own loan partner. You need your own loan partner. We went through that. And then they decided to go to another brand, like another company, and I stayed where I was. And I stayed where I was. I learned a lot, became a branch manager during that season, learned a lot, a lot in that season, just of like managing so many different things. And I wasn't completely unprepared for it because I ran a credit union branch for years and years as well. It's just a different dynamic. This is my business instead of me working for someone.
Right.
And then just one day, like things just kind of started feeling off. And I started looking at opportunities for me to do something different. That's always a big thing for me is I always want to stand in a different space than others. And I could have gone to any retail, shop and set up shop, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And you've dealt with Anthony before. So I got on the phone with him and then like 2 weeks later, it was like, "Oh, I'm joining UMortgage. Everything's good now." And then I love it though. So, but I went from retail to broker, which was a huge change for me, like a huge learning curve. The principles of what we do or the basics of what we do are all the same, but
Right.
this was just a totally different navigation system.
And having spent your whole career in that retail side of things and then switching to broker, aside from Anthony, like what was your primary reason for going and making that change? Because it is a bit of a shift in terms of how you do things and what you can do for your clients.
Well, yeah, like the platform that UMortgage offers, like, is really, really unique. That's the first thing. So I looked at a lot of different companies just to kind of see what people were doing, and I could just feel the difference. One of what we're doing here at UMortgage was the first thing, but outside of that, I really truly wanted to have a better offering. Like I didn't want to be able to. The space that I was in was comfortable, right, and I could have stayed there forever, but I wanted to be able to go. You know what? I want to be different. And if I'm going to leave this space, wherever I go has got to be different because I don't want to make a lateral move and go, "Oh, I just went from this company to another." It gave me the opportunity going from retail to broker. It gave me opportunity to say, "Hey, I'm stepping out and doing something different. Everybody should take advantage of this." And plus, like, ignorance is bliss. Like, I had no idea that there was such a much better offering in the broker world and we had options and we have all these different things that we could do. Like they keep blinders on you for real. Like when you're in that retail environment, they keep blinders on you because they don't want you to know how that business structure is built because it benefits them. But overall, like it takes away from the consumer. And for me, gosh, if you know anything about me, everything is personal when it comes to my clients. because everybody I deal with, I know, or I have to deal with them in my personal life. And so I take things pretty seriously every year.
Yeah, and that's the big thing though, that I think a lot of like consumers, buyers, sellers, people who want to refinance, what have you, they don't necessarily understand the differences between where they go get their mortgage, whether they're walking into a bank or credit union or using a broker like us or a retail place. What is the main benefits that the consumer gets? You kind of touched on, a little bit. What does the consumer see as a benefit working with a broker as opposed to going to a bank or a retail mortgage company?
Cost. And like the thing for me, it's all about the money that's due at the end of the day, and when you know that I can go in and price a loan. And matter of fact, I was speaking with a loan officer who called me last week and was just kind of talking about wanting to make some changes in their career. And one of the things that they were telling me is that they have a family member, their mother is doing a loan. And so we priced and compared, and her mother was paying significantly more for the loan that her company was offering than just a normal consumer would here on an everyday basis. And so when you think about that, it's like, oh my gosh, that's your mom. You know what I mean? Like, you're like ripping off your own mother. But the thing is that your normal everyday consumer is not going to know that. They're going to think the cost is what the cost is, the value is what the value is. But in truth, there are different values. And so I think that's a huge thing for me being really confident and going, no, hey, I know like it's competitive. And I know that when you're coming here and you're working with me, I'm not ripping you off. The market yields a certain rate and cost. And over here, you're getting overcharged for it. Over here, you're getting normal cost.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I actually did a video a while back about that exact same thing where I was posing the question to loan officers, like, if you wouldn't send your mother to your own company to get a loan, why are you still working there? And that's what happens for, a lot of people when they come to that realization that I try to add value to what I do. I try to make sure that I'm counseling my clients the right way, that I'm giving them options and doing all the right things by my client. But behind me, my company is adding on a huge profit margin on top of what it realistically should be. Right. Like at some point, when you do come to that realization, it's hard to stomach it. It's hard to sleep at night doing
literally.
that.
No, literally hard to sleep with that night. So when all of this started happening, like when I became aware, the reason I even became aware of it is because I was working with a client who chose to go with me over another loan officer that they knew pretty well. And so we're working through everything and exuberant amount of cost. Like I think we were charging, it would have failed points and fees. And for, the everyday consumer, they understand that there's only so much a loan officer can charge you within a transaction, not just loan, just compliance reasons, right? And it was like exuberant amount of cost. Well, of course, when he saw it, he was like, challenged it and took it to another loan officer, the other loan officer I know, to look at it. And that loan officer called me and was like, hey, I'm not taking this deal from you because I have too much respect for you and I don't want any like bad blood between us. But I just want you to know that your costs are far exceedingly more than mine. Like I was quoting $8,000 in discount points and he was quoting like $3,000 in discount points. And it was the first time ever where I was like, what? Zero idea. I had no idea, like none. And so it kind of opened this door for me to start really going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And me even saying one time, I'm like, I'm literally like I'm closing loans for people who are in my neighborhood, like literally living a couple of houses down from me. I have to make sure that what I have is the absolute best that's out there, or I cannot sleep at night. And that was the first time in my career where I realized that there was a difference. Like in the market, there really truly is a difference. And so I sought out the difference and then executed on being different.
Yeah. And it's a challenge for the consumer because, and I want to make it clear that like loan officers who are working for retail places and whatnot, they're not typically consciously going out and trying to screw anybody. Like they have the rates and stuff that they have. And like you expressed, a lot of times they just don't know the difference because in the company cultures there, they try to downplay and speak negatively of the broker channel or the wholesale channel, trying to tell you that you don't have any control, you can't talk to your underwriter, this and that. And there's all the stories that we've all heard. And, until you actually get into that other channel and realize, wait a minute, I actually have more control over my file, because if I have a lender who is not performing either on their rates or their fees or their turnaround time or performance, you have other choices. When you work for a retail mortgage company or a bank, you got what you got and you're going to be happy with it because you got no other options.
Exactly.
And so
you just get what you get.
For the consumer, I think it's just important to investigate that option. Even if you have a bank that you've banked at for 20 years, I mean, you probably don't know the loan officer there, so I don't know why that makes a difference. But a mortgage company that's a retail mortgage company versus a broker, at least include a broker in your considerations, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think it goes to show that I worked in an environment, which again, an incredible company, like not taken away from them or anything, just in general, that was incredible people. But I just didn't know. Like I legitimately didn't even know the difference between what brokers were doing and what I was doing. I just knew that it was just something that existed. And in my mind, it was all the same. Like that's really what I just thought. I was like, oh, I'm not paying any attention to that. But I was so glad. I think the message I sent to Anthony when I sent it was like, hey, so I have all these other options. I just want to like make sure I understand what this is because I had no idea. I just want to know what this is so that I can at least make sure that it's something I don't want to do before I go make another decision. And then now look where I am. So look what I did.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, it's a challenge for people who work in the industry is to understand what the different options are, like where do you work and how can you, properly take care of your clients. But for the consumer, it's even harder because like the consumer doesn't know what a retail mortgage company is. They don't know what a broker is. Like they've heard the terminology maybe, but how can they distinguish that? What would you tell the consumer? Like if you're out like looking for a loan officer, how can they differentiate between those two to make a good decision?
I mean, I think that's hard. Like, I think for a consumer, it's hard for them to really know. I would just encourage them. And that's another thing too. I'm a big believer and you can only listen to one voice in a room when you're trying to do something. Like you can hear a lot of voices in the room. So there's a lot of options that are out there, but you got to choose the one that's best for you. But I think overall, I think if people understood better, I think if people educated themselves better, then they would be able to be more open to looking at both options and including it. So, people will know that people know what an insurance broker is. You know what I mean? Like they know if you say insurance broker, they automatically go, oh, they're going to go out and shop insurance for me to see which has the best offering. But for whatever reason, when you say mortgage broker, it doesn't translate the same to people. So I think education is a huge thing. And I just kind of sit and think if somebody approached me and was like, well, what's the biggest difference? I mean, I would always tell them, it's having choice, like truly having choice and understanding that the choices that are available to you, they're being competitive because they want to do business. They want to do business. And you want to be able to put yourself in a position where you can get the best of what's out there. And broker, I would say 9 times out of 10 is going to be the best,
Yeah, I think one thing that people can ask, like one simple question that they can ask of the loan officer they're talking to is, does your company underwrite and approve the loan, or does somebody else do it? If somebody else is doing it, then you're talking to a broker. If their company is doing it, then you're talking to a banker. And again, not necessarily that it's bad one way or the other, but you want to include both of them. And then, costs and rates, it's important, but it's not the only thing, right? I mean, there's more to it for a consumer to decide upon. What are the things that are important for consumers to be able to learn about their financing aside from just the rate and the costs?
So for me, I think that communication and education in this process for people is key. Like if anything, like a lot of times people go into it so blindly. I can remember when we bought our first house, all we know is that we did an application and we gave a bunch of information and we literally knew nothing else, like nothing.
Yeah.
And now looking back on that, I refuse for people to have that kind of experience. So you're right. Like rate and costs are not the most important thing that somebody should be looking for. Experience, like whatever experience that they're looking for. Do you want to have a personal touch or do you not care about those things? You know what I mean? Like for me, everything, like I told you, is really personal. So we create like a personal environment and it's a one-on-one, but that communication is huge too. Like letting people know that, hey, you have options. I tell clients, if you're pre-approved and we say you can go conventional or FHA, really making sure they understand the difference of which one and why one may work better than the other one. So the communication piece is huge. Somebody who's going to respond, talk to them, and really spend time getting to know them because one, in my mind, if we're talking like doing a mortgage, and we all know this is like the largest purchase you make of your life, I want to be comfortable with someone. I want to make sure that that person I know has my best interest at heart and they're not just out here trying to make a dollar. And so I think communication and how people communicate in that process is huge. And then that experience, like making sure that they get what they need and they have their questions answered, was huge as well.
Yeah, that's one. I mean, it's really, really important. It's a great point that you brought up there, is the communication aspect of it. Because, like you said, it's a huge transaction, oftentimes the biggest one that the people will do,
Yeah.
but it's also one of the most stressful things that you go through in life.
Yep.
And the only
Yes.
way to alleviate stress is with information and knowledge, right?
Yes.
Like
True.
you've
Yeah.
got to know what to expect and what's happening in order to alleviate all that anxiety.
That is so true. And like, I know that even us as loan officers, when we buy houses, we feel that same anxiety.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
we buy a house and I'm like, am I approved? What did I do? And I'm like, I literally do this shit every damn day. How do I not? I know that everything's fine. I know I literally spend my existence is about me putting people at ease. But when you do it yourself, you still feel that same anxiety. So it's being able to understand that. And another thing too, for me, like as far the way that my business is built personally, it's also about the culture that we create. Like we really have this culture of like, hey, once you do business with us, you're just stuck with us for life. And we're trying to create that kind of culture where people are like, I want Kristen showing up at my closings. I want, I just closed a loan on a guy. This is the second house he's bought with me in three and a half-ish years. And like I didn't get to go to the closing on the first one. So I was so excited to go to this one. But
Yeah.
like creating that culture where he's like, oh, I'm going to sell my house and buy another one. The only person I'm going to call is Kristen because I know exactly what she's all about, and not just being able to deliver on the, executional things like getting the loan to the closing table. But dang, she cares. She's going to show up. We're going to laugh. She's going to be a part of my journey forever. Means a lot to me as a loan officer.
Yeah, that's huge because I mean, it's when you're helping somebody through that anxiety and that stress and that big decision, like you should be becoming, friends with them. It's not one of those things where it's about transactions. Obviously, it's a big thing at our company. It's relationships, not transactions.
Yeah.
And when you're giving people that input and that education up front, what do you feel like in today's market are some of the really important things for them to be thinking about? Because I don't know about your market, it's kind of changing. Like we're right in that transition period here in Arizona. What is important for people to be thinking about today when they're going out looking at buying?
To me, that they are in a position better for people buying right now are in a better position than they were a year ago. And like, I do think that that's important for people to know because I think a lot of people put off buying because last year, the years prior to this were like just hard for first time buyers. It was hard for people to get deals unless you had a ton of assets or you were selling a house to buy another house. Like it was really hard in this market. So I think it's important for people to know that there now is a space that exists where it's not as difficult, where you can negotiate, where you don't have to blindly just buy a house, ask, give more money than what they're asking, not ask for any repairs. Like all of that has changed. And I feel like it has really gone back to being normal. Like what we're experiencing right now in the market is normal, with the exception of, the rates being slightly higher. I haven't gotten a contract since the beginning of this year that didn't have closing costs on it. And you and I both know that like the years previous to this, probably 18 months before that, we went literally 18 months without seeing closing costs from a seller. So now it's an environment where you can negotiate and you can get things, get what you want out of this experience. And it's not just the buyer giving everything. And I feel like I keep saying this, but now is the time. If you've never bought, like when I tell people, I was like, you've never bought a home, like this is your time right now because it's not as competitive as it has been.
And it's about to change though too. And I think it's important for people to understand, if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, but the rates are whatever they are, that's just too high. I got to wait for them to come down. Like what's some good things for them to think about? I mean, you kind of touched on them right there about why they should maybe do it, even though the rate is not what they wanted to see.
Right. Well, so like rate, what I feel like happens when it comes to rate is that the media creates an environment around rate under which people make decisions, but not really clearly understanding why they're even making that decision. So somebody says, oh, well, the rates are high. And I say, okay, well, what are they? Well, then they don't really ever know. And then when I say, well, how does that relate to your situation? Because the thing that people cling to is just this idea that rates are high. they don't really look at how it relates to them on a personal level. So a lot of times I'll say, okay, well, let's kind of take a look at this. So you expect your rate to be what? And again, they can usually not ever answer that question. So the thing that I'm always trying to do is show them that, yes, while your monthly payment may be a little higher than what it would have been in other markets, it's still affordable. So if I'm looking at it and I'm going, hey, on paper, based off of this, you qualify to do this. Stop focusing on this part of it. Focus on the fact that you qualify. It would be one thing if you didn't qualify, but the fact that you qualify is what matters. So for the people that the rate environment has changed that, I understand their worries. I understand their concerns because they're like, well, now I don't qualify because the rate's higher, the payment's higher, but that's not the case. And that's the same thing I tell people. I said, I live by what I can see. And so when I'm doing pre-approvals every single day, and we're working on pre-approvals every single day, people qualify. And if you qualify, then it's a time that you can buy a house.
And I hate to use this analogy, but if you think about like going and buying a car, like we're not car salespeople, but does anybody go and make a decision about buying a car or not buying a car because the interest rates on a car loan are too high? Like, we never do that.
Literally never.
The payment, but what they've gotten people conditioned to is focus on the payment.
Yep.
Structure the financing, structure the price of the car based on the payment, because the payment is what you have to deal with on a monthly basis. Period. And so your advice there with the mortgage, it's the same. Yep. If you can afford the payment, then make your decision based on that, because at some point, like nobody's in a loan for 30 years. So you're not likely to be stuck in whatever rate you have today, probably more than a year at this point.
Right.
So can you afford it? Like, is real estate a good investment? Is the timing right? Because it's not always a good idea to buy. Right. I mean, in situations where people are thinking about maybe moving in a year or two, what would be the advice that you would give them?
Moving like selling or just moving like from a renting set?
I mean, they're just not, they don't know. They might not be in the house that long. Like, you got to ask a bunch of questions. What's your normal process for like investigating their motivations?
So that's actually really, I'm glad that you asked that, because one of the things I was going to say is in my initial conversations, I ask questions in a way that lays groundwork so that when we get to the end result, that I don't have a ton of resistance. So, I ask things like, what is your target monthly payment? Give me an idea of what range. Like if you had to say right now, this is what I feel like I could afford. I ask that question, ask it in a way, and I always use the word target monthly payment. That I don't say desired, because what I know that from an emotional, psychological standpoint is that if somebody says 1,500, they really can do 1,700. And if it's the house of their dreams, they'll even do 1,800, right? Yeah. So I ask questions in a way that lays the groundwork that I don't have a ton of, objections at the very end of it. But I ask those questions. What is your target? What are your goals? This is your first time buying. I assess everything from, it's your first time buying, where are you at this stage of your life? I always tell people, I hope you make a decision for right now based on your current circumstances with the future in mind. You can talk to so many of my clients, and so many of them will tell you, she said those exact words to me, because I understand that there's so many different seasons of life, and that you may live in this house for 3 years. You may live in this house for 9 years. You may live in this house for 5 years, whatever it is. You can't make decisions just based off of 9 years from now or 5 years from now. You got to go, okay, right now, this situation serves me. I'm going to make this decision right now, knowing that in the future, if I change that decision and I want to move or I want to sell, I'm putting myself in a position to do so, as long as I buy smart and I don't buy a crazy house that I know can't sell that nobody would ever want. You can always change your direction of where you're going. It's funny that this question, our first house we lived in for 5 years. Our second house we lived in for 9 years. Our third house we lived in there for 1.5 years. And then I bought the same house across the street with more acreage. You know what I mean? So like when I built that first house, I would have never imagined in a million years that I would be going, you know what, this is just not enough. We need more, I would have never imagined that. So, but at the time that I made that decision, I made it with the information on where I was in life, knowing that the future, it would still serve me in the future. So when I go through that process with people, if for anybody who's watching that's, a buyer that's wanting to like connect with lenders, make sure this person really understands who you are, and that they understand where your future is and what you're planning for the future, and that they actually are invested in that, not from a standpoint of like, oh, let me just get you closed, but from a standpoint of like, No, when somebody calls me 3 years later, I know how old their kids are. I know what school systems their kids are in. I know what seasons of life they're getting ready to enter in. Like, make sure that that loan officer cares that much.
I think that's a great point. Like I was asking you before,
Mhm.
how does a consumer make a decision between, one loan officer versus another?
Yeah.
Like this conversation that you're talking about, if you're not having that,
Yeah.
like you probably need to go walk in a different direction,
Yep.
because those are the things that are important. It's very easy to be based on a single transaction at a point in time without regard for what's happening in the future.
Right.
Obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we have to have an eye on it and make sure that, if we have dreams and we have plans that we want to do, am I putting myself in a position to be able to accomplish that? And if I don't have a loan officer asking me
Right.
those questions, like they don't care, they're just worried about getting this transaction done. I think that's a risk of like commoditizing our industry, where people go online and they click a button, they think, okay, I got the mortgage. Well, you can get a mortgage that way, but
Okay.
it's not necessarily going to serve you for the long haul.
It isn't. And especially when people are so disconnected, like if you're not, I can't think of a time where I've dealt with anyone where I was not connected to them in some way, it's like, and what I mean by that is like whether I could relate to their season of life, me caring, when people, nothing brings me more joy than watching families grow into their homes and being a part of it. Like truly, like when my clients buy a house and then they have their first baby, and then I get to send them, especially when it's girls, and I send them these little red little shoes. I love it so much.
You
And
indoctrinate
and I
them,
get to
right?
send for the boys, I send little red vans, but like being able to send baby blankets and then having second children. I have families have had 2 children since they bought a house with me, but they know that when they pick up the phone to call me, when they decide to move from that house, I am so confident that there's not anyone else they're going to call, because I took the time to get to know them. I wanted to be a part of their family and wanted to be a part of them growing into their home. And it's an equal give and take. Like I really do really feel that way with my clients. I love running into people. I ran into a couple out to dinner and we sat there and talked for like 20 minutes. I know my friends were like, "Can you quit talking to the people around us?" But it was fine, but it was valuable. They wanted that space with me and I actually cared about them, and they were shocked that I even remembered who they were when I walked up, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And they're like, "I cannot believe you even know who we are right now." And I'm like, "How could I forget? How could I forget? Because I actually cared when you were in that process." Some loan officers are not built like this, though. They're just not.
No, and I think that's the key is when people are trying to go through this process, you
Mhm.
want somebody who's going to lock arms with you and be there and support you and make sure that you're going on this journey
Mhm.
together.
Yeah,
You're not in an adversarial situation. You're not being sold something or
right.
convinced of something. You've got somebody that's going to hold your hand and walk you through it and take care of it, because we all need that. Like in all aspects of our life, we need those relationships that are there to support us.
Yes, absolutely. We 1000%.
And we probably never knew that it was going to be that way getting into this industry, did we?
Not, not even close. Like even like I joke, I'm like, when I started, I was like, I just wanted to close like 2 or 3 loans, just enough to like contribute to my household. And then it was like, oh wait. And then actually the thing I love the most is like people, I understand that this is how I make a living, but people don't realize that the thing that I enjoy the most is really being a part of that journey with people. And then knowing that at the end of the day that I help them create a safe space for their family. Like that right there for me is huge. As a military brat, like my father, we traveled our entire lives. And my parents didn't own a home until my dad retired because we were always traveling. So we retired to buy a home. But then to find out that when they bought that house back in 97, he didn't use his VA benefit. Like finding out stuff like this to
Wow.
me is mind blowing, right? And what that tells me is that the loan officer at the time who did that loan did not care enough to ask the right questions to make sure that they were getting the best offering. I will never let a person who encounters me ever experience something like that because it's not the way that I want to live. I want to make sure that if somebody reaches out to me, that I go through everything that's available to them because I was like so disgusted at this idea that my father served in the military for 20 years, buys his first house after traveling is pretty much his whole life, for the military,
Yeah.
and didn't get to use his VA benefit. Didn't get to use it. Didn't get to use it. It's mind blowing to me. So
Yeah.
I do carry that into every interaction, like going, you know what? These people, everybody matters. I don't care if you're buying $100,000 home or a $2 million home. I treat everybody the same. they get the same experience, because the amount of house that you're buying is not what's valuable to me as much as it is that creating a space where your family's safe is valuable to me.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes back to it. It's not about the transaction. It's about the relationship and the people that you're dealing with. And it's really unfortunate. Like, we see that in the industry a lot, where people don't use their VA benefit, and like, you put a lot in, you've earned this. It is the best loan program that's out there, bar none. Like, there's nothing better. And
Nope.
it is heartbreaking when you hear that somebody hasn't used it. I mean, I've had clients that, were Vietnam era veterans, and they never used it. They're 50s and 60s, and they never use it. And really, it comes down to one simple thing. It's one simple question.
Right. Literally, have you ever served? And I mean, it's one question.
And it's bad because, like, a lot of loan officers really don't understand it well enough to be versed at it too. So they don't ask it because maybe they're afraid that they don't know that program well enough.
Yeah. Screw that. Well, that's also too why that people need to become, if you're going to do this and help people, do it. Like, understand and know. And like, of course, there's been times where I'm like, oh, I've encountered something different and I don't know everything about this, but there's not much that's going to stop me, right? Like, if I know that something's available that's out there, we'll just figure out what we got to do to make that work for somebody, if it works for them. But yeah, it just comes down, like you said, it's one freaking question. That's it. And people just don't. And I think loan officers don't do a good job at really doing what I call a needs assessment. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're exploring this opportunity with somebody from a perspective of like, how much can I get you qualified for? Versus for me, I look at people, a needs assessment. Like, let's really look at your needs financially, emotionally, and like what things like, how can I add value to that space? And I think if we started as loan officers across the board, if we started looking at the questions we ask as needs assessments versus just qualifications, it would change our environment significantly.
And it's a good point too, because I think real estate agents should be doing that same type of assessment as well, because like, for the consumer, and that's the thing that motivated me to do this in the first place, because people just don't understand so much about what happens with real estate. Like, a lot of people go buy it, that's probably their biggest asset, and they're just clueless. Like you said, when you go through it the first time, like, you just know, okay, they gave me this rate, they got me approved, I closed, and I know nothing else about what actually happened in that process.
Yeah.
And what I think a consumer can do really well from themselves is ask a lot of questions of whether it's the real estate person or the lender, and see the responses that you get back. Right. Are those people digging deeper and asking more, insightful questions, or is it all just based on the transaction that's at hand? And if it's skipping over the people, then, that's probably not the right person. Like, don't hesitate, go into the next person, because so many people choose their realtor based upon that being the first person that they talk to.
Right. And same thing with their lender. I went over a pre-approval with a young gentleman, first time buying a house. And we got in the conversation, and I told him, I said, listen, so you qualify for this amount. However, based off of our conversation, this is where I would say you should start. And if you don't see anything in this price range, then we'll work your way into like, hey, Kristen, I'm not seeing anything. What other things can we do? Because based off of what you and I have determined and what I have understood from you, this is where you want to be. So let's start here. And he literally said, do you know that I went out and he said, I've been Googling and I've been doing all this stuff. And he says, one of the things somebody gave advice, said, if your loan officer tries to give you the highest loan amount and tells you this is where you need to shop at, and they don't actually go back to like being conservative with it, then you're probably not in the right space. And so he was really thankful that I was like, listen, yeah, you qualify for 400,000, but let's start 350 is good. I'm a mom, like through and through. I'm a mother hen. Brian knows this about me because I care so much about people. And I am always going to embody this essence of, I don't care how old someone is. Like, I want to make sure that they're creating a space where they can actually thrive. And so I don't want someone going out just because you can't afford a $500,000 house doesn't mean you should buy it for your first time go around, because you may not have experienced that type of responsibility. And I want to make sure that I don't create like, no, that's not a thing. But we know I'm so caring and I love people so much.
Well, we will have other people echo that sentiment about you as well. Trust me.
Oh.
You want to buy a house, but high interest rates have got you down? Take the rate challenge and send us a verifiable loan estimate from another lender, and we'll beat it and pay for your appraisal up to $600. Here at Give Mortgage, being powered by UMortgage allows us to provide you with unmatched speed and efficiency and the best rates and fees in the market, all while delivering you the concierge level service you deserve. We want you to have an experience getting a mortgage that you'll never forget, and not because you got put through a meat grinder to get it. At Give Mortgage, we give great advice, we give the best rates, and we give back to charity. Visit us at www.give-mortgage.com or call us at 480-331-4684 to schedule a free consultation to see how we can help.
So I think that's a great takeaway, though, and I do a similar thing. We ask, what is the payment that they have felt in their budget that they can afford. Right. And then I tell them, we're going to give you two sets of numbers. We're going to translate it all into a purchase price. We're going to tell you what the most is that you can qualify for, but then we're going to tell you where you should be shopping based upon what you've budgeted for yourself. Because if I can tell you can qualify for more, but that doesn't mean that's what you should spend just because I said you can do it. So if you're not hearing, those two different sets of numbers from a loan officer, then again, not the right place. You need someone who's going to help you make smart decisions, not just the convenient decisions.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about. It goes back to that experience, and just knowing that people will know that you actually are listening. And that, as a matter of fact, I had a young woman who was like, her dad told her to shop. She went out there into the world to shop and right back knocking on this door like, yep, okay, I tried that. And nobody treated me the way that you did. No one talked to me. No one explained. They'd not taken me seriously. And I'm like, and now you've wasted some time because you're getting the very best. Like, that's the one thing I'm confident about too, is that when I'm working with my clients, they're getting the best. Like, they're not just getting the best of me, they're getting the best of my team, they're getting the best offering, they're getting an environment that is really successful and that thrives. So like, just stay where you are, be comfortable, trust the people and listen to one voice. You can't listen to everybody during this process. Your agent and your lender have to be the loudest voices in a room for sure.
So just shift gears real quick, because, we hear this all the time where, people are, they get in connection with a real estate agent, might be from a referral, or maybe it's a family member or what have you. And I always ask this to agents on the show, for the real estate side of it, how does the consumer make a good choice on the real estate agent that they work with? That
is a really good question, because I'm going to tell you, I have an agent that I work with that's on the north side of Atlanta, and somebody who'd come to me, they came to me through a referral and they chose their own agent. And immediately I was like, this agent sucks. Like, I knew just the way they were communicating, this is no kidding. That first agent they were with, I think they made 3 offers that didn't get accepted. And I started saying, hey, listen, when I'm calling and talking to these agents, they're like the listing agent, they're really excited to hear from me. But then when they get the offer, they're not even exploring it. There's something that's happening there. They moved to a different agent, and I'm going to answer your question, but they moved to a different agent. Same thing. 7 offers on different properties, none of them accepted. So they're starting to get really discouraged. We're never going to buy. And I said, will y'all just trust me? Will you guys just let me connect you with one of my agents? They did. And no kidding you, 2 weeks later, they were under contract and closed on that house. And it is all that makes all the difference. And so when people are looking at an agent, like, you don't always have to go for what's shiny and bright and looks like something that you just want to be a part of. Make sure that person is, one, a really good negotiator, a really good communicator, and people have a lot of respect for them. Because and a lot of people can tell you, they'll say, oh, that agent, her offer was so clean. The way she communicated was so clean. How an agent is communicating with you during the process of exploring if you're going to work with them is going to tell you a lot about how that person's going to be communicating. Yeah. Like, so whether it's from how they send text messages to how they send emails, to every single part of it matters. But if I'm looking at a client and say, you're picking an agent, that agent better have really good communication skills. You better know that they're going to write a really good offer, and that when they do make that offer, if they call and talk to the other agent, the agent's not going to think they're an idiot. Like, just bottom line, like, the amount of people who go with an agent because they're shiny blows my world. It blows my mind, because it's like, that shiny is not going to get you the results that you want. is only going to make you feel a certain way, but we need results.
Yeah.
So
And it's tough. I mean, that's the hardest thing I think for the consumers. Like, how do you make these choices? Like, what
yeah,
is the basis? Because it's not the numbers all the time, although that can be helpful because obviously somebody can be the most empathetic and caring person and connect with you personally, and they've done, 2 transactions in a year and they're not well versed in negotiation. Like, that's probably not going to be a great fit for you. But
yeah,
also that person that's doing, 100 or 200 transactions a year, and it's very,
diluted.
yeah, it's not personal. There's not that connection, and they're
Yep,
leaving the communication up to somebody else.
yep,
That's also probably not a great situation for you. And I think your advice there is fantastic because it does boil down to communication. Like, people
mhm,
might think that this is all about, hey, just send an offer in and we'll see what happens. Are the numbers good? And
yeah,
that really has, I mean, it has something to do with it, but it's not the key. It's the relationship that an agent can establish with the listing agent to
yeah,
try to build rapport. Like, we
yep,
just had one, we got the contract. I think it was late Sunday night. It was Monday morning that it came in, but the agent did her legwork. She's a really good agent. She asked the right questions. She knew there was a multiple offer situation. She
mhm,
contacted me and said, hey, can we close in 30 days? I'm like, hey, we can close in like 15 days if you need to.
yeah, yeah. We can
Do
do
what you need
12
to
if you
do.
want. So
But
yeah.
the thing is like, she went back to that agent,
Mhm,
obviously expressed that to the agent. The agent said, wait, we need to close on May 5th. So she changed the offer midstream. And then I send my video over to that agent too, talking about how we communicate, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. And, multiple offer situation at list. And we got it, that same night because
yeah,
that agent did a good job communicating. We did our part in communicating. And
yeah.
that's what ends up winning the deal is the communication.
Yeah. Well, and I always love that because there's two things that I will drop all activities for, and that's when somebody makes an offer and they want me to call a listing agent. Like, if it doesn't matter what's going on, I will be like, let me call this listing agent. I can be right back. I got to call this listing agent. It doesn't matter what time it is,
Yep.
early, late, it doesn't matter. I'm making some type of connection because it sets us apart. But the thing is that when that person can hear my voice on the other end and they go, oh, this is the lender calling, like, oh, okay, they're working together. I had somebody
Mhm.
actually say that, like, you too. She's like, I got this offer and you called me 10 minutes later. Like, I said, that's because me and the agent work together. We are not working on separate planes. Like, we are all on the same team and we want you to be a part of our team right now to get this transaction done. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my new agents too, is being on the side. I'm in a transaction right now where one of my clients selected their own agent, and I'm talking to the listing agent more than I am my client's agent because she's way more experienced. She's really controlling the environment around what's happening, and not in a bad way. But me and her talk more than the agent that's working with my buyer. But it's like the difference of me going, my goodness, your agent's not even doing the things they're supposed to be doing. It makes me crazy. It makes me fucking crazy when people do that. So,
Yeah, when you've been doing this for a little while, you can spot a good agent in a matter of like a minute or two conversation,
yeah,
and it really is very clear to us. And it's hard because the consumer they just don't know. But
they
I
don't know.
think I always tell people you got to trust your gut. Like,
Yeah.
if you feel like something's off or not right, or you don't feel a good connection, like,
Mhm.
trust that because it's there for a reason. And if you're experiencing it, chances are other people that are going to be involved in this transaction are probably also going to experience it.
Exactly
Because if
right.
you're a good communicator,
Yep.
like, you're going to be that way with everybody.
Yep.
If you're a shitty communicator, you're going to be that way with everybody, and it's going to
Period.
come through to the people that you don't want it to come through to.
No, and I'm serious. Like, I actually told somebody this in one of my very heightened states of like emotions recently. I was like, hey, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And how someone communicates with individuals during this process and they don't get results. If you ask for something 2 or 3 times and you don't get the results, that's insanity. You know what I mean? But it comes back to communication. And so I always tell people, the people who work with me are like, man, Kristen will come for you in a communication. If you better make sure everything's all buttoned up, and not in a negative way, but just in a very constructive way. Communication is everything. If you send an email and you don't get the results you want, and then I can send an email and get the results we want, there's a disconnect in communication. So like that tells me that the way that you're communicating is clearly not being like received well. And I've had this conversation recently because I say something and like if somebody doesn't understand that communication, I then go back and I'm like, I'm sorry, you deal with me on a normal basis. Do you understand when I'm talking to you and I say things? Do you understand? They're like, yes. I'm like, okay. So when someone doesn't understand, what are we thinking? Do you think it's me or do you think it's them? Like if I communicate so clearly, like except for doing math, except for my math skills, from a communication standpoint, when you are in a transaction like buying a house, how I'm going to communicate with the listing, my agents know that how I'm going to communicate with the listing agent. Anybody who's involved in that transaction is going to be the most productive to get the results that we want. It's not ever going to be surface level. It's going to be me listening and understanding that. I called an exterminator the other day and said, hey, this is what we got, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, wait, no, I gave them what you needed. And he's like, they just ripped it apart. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, 4 people before me had called him, asking him about this same specific scenario, but they did not take 2 extra steps to ask 2 extra questions to get what we needed. And I asked more questions. And guess what? In those questions, I found out that the letter that we needed, he had actually given the client. The client just didn't realize we didn't need it. So he separated it from the receipt and didn't give us the letter. And I'm like, what the actual hell? But it goes to show that in certain situations, in this world, when you don't get the results that you're looking for, you got to be able to communicate what you need so that you can get the results you need. Yeah.
And you got to be persistent about it. And you've got to speak in a way that people, can understand it and hear you. And it's a skill set. And, it's not one that everybody has. If people have been listening or watching to us here today, and they think, hey, I think I like Kristen. I think she's a good communicator. I want to have her help me. How do they get in touch with you?
So they can always call me on my personal cell phone. It's 770-598-3004. And then, of course, just like go out there and search Kristen Morgan. There's no place like home mortgage team, and look for the red high heels. If you see the red high heels, you've probably found me. That's for sure.
Are the red high heels there right now? I mean,
they're not. Listen, I almost wore them. But I didn't because, if you saw on Facebook, my children criticized me the other day for wearing all my all my things that I feel like are happy, good vibes. And they make fun of me when I'm at home dressed in high heels, walking around in the house. So I'm not wearing them today.
That's your kid's job, though. They got to bring you back down to earth a little bit.
Every single moment of my life, they do it.
Well, Kristen, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share all your wealth of knowledge. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me. And this has been fun. It was great.
No math questions either.
Oh, I made it. Oh, I feel so much better now. It's an inside joke between me, Brian, and a few other people. It's just I'm just going to be stuck with this for the rest of my life. And I'm okay with it. I did it to myself. So I'm okay.
Well, the most difficult question anyone will ask you is, what is the best graduation year for anyone?
1971.
There you go. That's all I wanted to hear from you today. Kristen, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us for the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Again, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us, and please remember to go and subscribe, like, share, all that cool stuff to help us grow, and come back to listen to our next episode. Until then, go out and live life uncensored.
Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to help us out and subscribe. Follow and give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. And check us out on YouTube for the full video podcast. If you want more information on any of the topics discussed on today's episode, email us at uncensoredrealestatepodcast@gmail.com or give the Cardenas Mortgage Team a call at 480-331-4684.